Professor Kevin stood at the front of his empty classroom on Zixthor University, looking out at the long rows of seats. The morning light came through the windows in a soft blue glow. He took a deep breath and smiled to himself. Another semester was about to begin, and he could not have been more happy about it. Kevin was a Zentaurian, a blue-skinned alien with smooth features and intelligent eyes that had studied dead civilizations for over 30 years. His office was filled with books and research papers about extinct species from across the galaxy. On his walls, he had pictures of ancient ruins, old weapons, and strange artifacts from worlds that no longer had any life. He was an expert in his field, and everyone at the university knew his name. Today, he would teach his most favorite class, Extinct and Mythological Species of the Known Universe. It was an elective course, which meant only students who really wanted to learn would come. Kevin had taught this class many times before, and he always loved it. The students always listened with open eyes and open minds as he told them about the species that had come and gone throughout the long history of the galaxy. The first students began to come into the classroom. There was Krell, a tall green Crolian with 4 arms. Behind him came Xena, a small Zephian woman with purple skin. Then came more and more students, filling up the seats. By the time the bell rang, there were about 25 students waiting for Kevin to begin. Kevin walked to the front of the classroom and pressed a button on his desk. A large screen lit up behind him, showing the title of his first lecture, Homo sapiens sapiens, the mythological aggressive species. "Good morning, everyone," Kevin said, his voice calm and sure. "Today, we begin our journey through the history of extinct civilizations, and there is no better place to start than with one of the most famous myths of the galaxy." The students leaned forward in their seats, ready to listen. Kevin loved this part. He loved being the expert, the teacher who knew everything about these old, dead worlds. "We start with humanity," Kevin continued. "Or more accurately, we start with the humans. They lived on a small planet called Earth, in a system far away from here. They existed about 10,000 years ago, maybe more. And let me tell you, they were unlike anything you have ever read about." Kevin pressed another button, and images appeared on the screen. They showed scenes of old wars, weapons, and explosions. Some of the students made sounds of surprise and shock. "Humans were brutal," Kevin said, his voice growing more excited. "They fought with each other constantly. They created weapons of terrible power. They destroyed their own environment. They were driven by emotions and desires that made them unpredictable and dangerous. This is why the ancient beings of the galaxy feared them so much." A student named Pero raised his hand. "Professor, what happened to them? Why did they go extinct?" Kevin smiled. He loved this question. "That is the mystery, Pero. We have many theories. Some say they destroyed themselves in a great war. Others say they tried to spread to other worlds and failed. The truth is, we may never know. But what we do know is that humanity is nothing but a myth to us now, a story, a legend." Kevin felt very pleased with himself. This was his domain, his area of knowledge. He was the expert, the one who understood these dead civilizations better than anyone else at the university. The classroom door suddenly opened. Kevin did not look up at first. He was too busy explaining the next slide. He was talking about human weapons, about their wars, about how they had almost destroyed their own world. Then he heard a sound. It was a gasp, then another, then many gasps at once. Kevin stopped talking and looked up. His eyes went wide. His mouth opened, but no words came out. Standing in the doorway of his classroom were 3 beings that should not exist. They looked like the pictures in his books. They had skin that was not green or blue or purple. It was tan and pink and brown. They had round ears and round faces. They had only 2 arms. They were standing there, looking at the classroom full of alien students, and the alien students were staring back at them with expressions of shock and fear. These beings were humans. They were alive. Kevin felt the room begin to spin. His hand reached out and grabbed the edge of his desk to steady himself. His carefully prepared notes suddenly seemed useless. All his knowledge, all his research, all his years of studying a dead species meant nothing now. The human in the front was a young woman with short, dark hair and intelligent eyes. Her name was Ji Woo. Behind her came another woman with longer hair and a calm expression. Her name was Na Ri. And behind them came a young man with a confident smile. His name was Teo. "Sorry we are late," Ji Woo said in perfect alien language, though her accent was different from what Kevin had ever heard before. "We are the new exchange students from Earth. The dean said to bring us to this classroom." Kevin opened his mouth. No sound came out. He tried again. Still nothing. Some of the alien students in the classroom began to move. Krell stood up and moved to the far end of the room. Xena pressed herself into her seat, as if she was trying to become invisible. Others whispered to each other nervously. Nari looked around the classroom with calm, observant eyes. She seemed to understand that something was wrong, but she did not seem afraid. She simply waited for someone to tell her what to do. Teo stepped forward. He was looking directly at Professor Kevin. "We were told to come to advanced mythology class at this time. Is this the right room?" He asked the question politely, as if he did not notice that his arrival had caused every alien in the room to have a moment of panic. Kevin's face had turned even more blue than usual. He opened his mouth, closed it, opened it again. He said weakly. You cannot be—" Ji Woo tilted her head. "Cannot be what?" she asked. Kevin could not find the words. The three humans looked at the empty seats next to the alien students. Very slowly, they walked over and sat down. They placed their bags on the ground and looked up at Professor Kevin, waiting for the class to begin. Kevin stood frozen, staring at them. His mind was racing. His research was wrong. His books were wrong. His entire career was suddenly in question. The species he had spent 30 years studying as an extinct civilization was sitting in his classroom, waiting for him to teach them about mythology. Around the room, the alien students whispered to each other. Some of them were pulling out communication devices, probably calling their friends to tell them what was happening. Professor Kevin's terrible day had just begun. The next morning, Professor Kevin did not sleep well. He had spent the entire night going through his notes, checking his research, and looking at his books about human extinction. Everything said the same thing. Humanity was dead. They had gone extinct thousands of years ago. There was no way they could be alive now. Yet they were. Kevin sat at his desk in his office, drinking a hot beverage that was supposed to calm his nerves. It was not working. His hands were still shaking. His mind was still racing. He had no idea what he was going to do during today's class. The classroom door opened at the exact time that the class was supposed to start. Kevin looked up. Ji Woo, Nari, and Teo walked in, along with the other students. They seemed calm and ready to learn, as if nothing strange had happened the day before. The three humans sat in the same seats they had chosen yesterday. Kevin stood up slowly. He looked at his notes. He looked at the presentation he had prepared. He looked back at his notes again. Everything in front of him suddenly seemed like lies. "Good morning," Kevin said, his voice not as strong as it usually was. "Today we will continue with our study of human warfare strategies in the ancient world." Ji Woo raised her hand. Kevin pointed to her, trying not to show how nervous he felt. "Professor," Ji Woo said in her calm voice, "I think there might be an error in your presentation." Kevin's heart began to beat faster. "An error? What kind of error?" You said that humans fought wars randomly, without any real strategy, Jiwoo explained. But that is not quite accurate. Human warfare was actually very complex and strategic. We had military leaders who studied mathematics and geography. We planned our attacks carefully. We had rules about how wars should be fought, even though those rules were often broken. Kevin opened his mouth to argue, but Jiwoo continued. For example, she said, humans used formations, terrain, and timing to win battles. We created weapons that were designed for specific purposes. We did not just throw weapons randomly at our enemies, we thought about how to use them most effectively. It was actually quite sophisticated for the time period. The other students in the classroom were listening carefully. Some of them were nodding. Nari was taking notes. Kevin felt sweat beginning to form on his blue forehead. Well, Kevin said slowly, that is one perspective. But the records show that humans were primarily driven by emotion and anger, not by strategy. Nari raised her hand this time. Kevin felt even more nervous. Yes? He asked. Professor, if humans were only driven by emotion, Nari said, how did we create art? How did we write poetry and music? How did we develop mathematics? How did we build cities and create systems of government? These things require careful thinking and planning, not just emotion. Kevin did not have a good answer. He tried to change the topic, but Teo raised his hand too. Professor, Teo said with a polite smile, I have been thinking about what you said yesterday about humans being a primitive species. But if we were so primitive, how did we develop flight? How did we create mechanical tools? How did we eventually build spaceships? I mean, we are sitting here now, on your university, in a spaceship that we built ourselves. That does not sound very primitive to me. The classroom became very quiet. Other students were looking at each other. Kevin could feel his authority beginning to slip away like sand through his fingers. These are good questions, Kevin said, trying to sound like he still knew what he was talking about. But you must understand that many of these advancements happened only recently, in the last few hundred years. Before that, humanity was still quite primitive, very primitive indeed. Jiwoo was writing something down. She was not arguing with him anymore, but Kevin could see that she was not convinced by his answers either. None of the students seemed convinced anymore. Over the next few days, Kevin's lectures became more and more difficult to give. Every time he said something about humans, one of the three students would raise their hand and gently correct him. It was not mean or angry. It was not even disrespectful, but it was clear that his information was wrong. On the third day of the new semester, an older professor came to observe Kevin's class. Her name was Radha, and she was a wise Zephian with purple skin and white hair. Professor Radha was known for her careful attention to detail and her excellent scholarship. She sat at the back of the classroom and took notes as Kevin taught. Kevin tried his best. He tried to sound confident. He tried to make his old research sound true and correct. But he could see Professor Radha writing things down, and he knew she was catching all of his mistakes. After the class ended, Professor Radha waited for Kevin in the hallway. Kevin's stomach felt heavy as she approached him. That was an interesting lecture, Radha said. She was looking at Kevin with eyes that seemed to see through him. Thank you, Kevin said, trying to smile. I was trying to make the material engaging for the students. Yes, Radha said slowly. I noticed that the three human students corrected several of your statements. The information they provided seemed accurate. Much more accurate than what was in your presentation. Kevin's face turned an even darker shade of blue. Well, they are just one perspective. There are many ways to interpret historical events. Radha's eyes became sharper. Kevin, I have read your books. I have studied your research for many years, and I must tell you that something does not seem right. Your information about humans seems to be based on very old sources. Very, very old sources. before we had the technology to observe other worlds accurately. Perhaps, Kevin said quietly, we should talk about this in my office. Perhaps we should, Radha agreed. She paused and then she added, but Kevin, I think you should prepare yourself. I have been hearing rumors that the dean is very interested in what is happening in your classroom, and I have a feeling that the truth about human civilization is going to become very difficult to ignore. Kevin did not answer. He just nodded and walked away, his mind filled with worry and doubt. His entire career, everything he had built over 30 years, was beginning to fall apart, and there was nothing he could do to stop it. That night, Kevin sat alone in his office, surrounded by his books and his research. He realized that he had built his entire professional life on information that was probably wrong. The humans sitting in his classroom had shown him more truth in just 3 days than all of his years of study had revealed. The question was, what was he going to do about it? Professor Kevin sat in his office, looking at the assignment sheet he had just created. A small, satisfied smile appeared on his blue face. This was his answer. This was how he would fix everything. He had decided to give his students a major project. The students would have to work in groups and research the mythological nature of humanity. They would present evidence showing that humans were indeed primitive, emotional, and dangerous. It was the perfect plan. The alien students would help him prove his theories. And the 3 humans? Well, they would be unable to defend themselves against such overwhelming academic evidence. Kevin felt more confident than he had in days. The next morning, he handed out the assignment to the class. He watched carefully as Jiwoo, Nari, and Tai-O read the instructions. He was waiting for them to look worried or upset. Instead, they just looked at each other and nodded. "No problem, Professor," Tai-O said cheerfully. "We will show everyone the truth about humans." Kevin felt a small flutter of worry in his chest, but he pushed it aside. How much could 3 young humans really accomplish? The research was against them. The historical records were against them. Everything was against them. Over the next week, Kevin noticed something strange happening around the campus. Other human exchange students began to arrive. There was Junho, a tall young man with serious eyes and a natural way of explaining complex ideas. There was Min-ai, a woman with a sharp mind and a talent for research. There was Sung-il, an engineer with hands that never stopped moving and a brain that was always creating solutions. These humans began to work with Jiwoo, Nari, and Tai-O. Kevin would see them in the library, gathering information. He would see them in computer rooms, creating presentations. They were very busy, and they seemed very organized. Kevin tried not to worry, but the worry was growing inside him like a small seed that was beginning to grow into something much larger. Meanwhile, something else was happening on campus. Other alien students started to ask questions. They began to do their own research about human history. They looked at real records, not just the old myths and legends. They read human books and studied human art and music. They watched videos of human cities and human technology, and they started to realize that everything Professor Kevin had taught them might be wrong. Kevin noticed this too. He could see it in the eyes of his students during his lectures. They did not believe him anymore. They were looking at him with doubt and confusion instead of respect and trust. One day, Kevin was walking through the hallway when he saw Professor Radha coming toward him. She had a small piece of paper in her hand, and she looked serious. "Kevin," she said, "the dean wants to see you. She wants to know about the project your students are working on. She seems very interested in what is happening in your class." Kevin's stomach felt like it was made of ice. "Did she say why?" he asked, but he already knew the answer. "She did not have to say," Radha replied gently. "Everyone at the university knows that something unusual is happening. The humans are preparing a presentation. The alien students are talking about it constantly, and the dean is very curious to see what it will contain." After Rada left, Kevin sat down on a bench in the hallway. He had a choice to make. He could stop the project. He could tell the students that the assignment was canceled. He could find some excuse to prevent the presentation from happening. But Kevin knew that if he did that, he would look even worse. Everyone would know that he was afraid of the truth. And they would be right. So Kevin decided to let the project continue. He decided to let it happen. Perhaps, he told himself, the students would not be able to create a good presentation. Perhaps the evidence would not be as strong as he thought. Perhaps he was still the expert, and the truth was still on his side. But deep down, Kevin knew he was lying to himself. A few days before the presentation was supposed to happen, Kevin made a mistake. He went to the library to do some research of his own. He was looking for information that would support his theories, but instead of finding support, he found truth. He read about human achievement. He read about human science and mathematics and medicine. He read about human art and philosophy and culture. He read about humans who had overcome terrible obstacles and created beautiful things. He read about humans who had helped each other and loved each other and tried to make their world better. Kevin sat there in the library with a book in his hands, and he felt something break inside him. He realized that his entire career had been built on lies, not because he had wanted to lie, but because he had simply accepted old information without checking if it was true. He had been careless with the truth. He had been lazy with his research. And now, that carelessness was going to cost him everything. The presentation was scheduled for the following week. Kevin tried to prepare himself for it, but he did not know how. He attended a university gathering where the dean announced that the event would be held in the main auditorium. She said it would be open to all students and teachers and staff members. She said it was a great opportunity for the university to learn about human civilization from humans themselves. Kevin heard this announcement and felt nothing but dread. When he went to bed that night, he did not sleep. He lay in the darkness, thinking about Ji-woo and Nari and Teo. They had been so kind to him, even though he had been treating them as if they were myths instead of real beings. They had corrected his mistakes politely. They had not been angry. They had just wanted him to see the truth. And tomorrow, or the next day, they were going to show that truth to everyone at the university, and there was nothing Kevin could do to stop it. Professor Kevin's terrible day was about to become even more terrible. The main auditorium of Zixthor University was full. Hundreds of students had come to watch the presentation. Teachers and staff members filled the seats. Even some important people from outside the university had arrived. Everyone wanted to see what the humans had prepared. Professor Kevin sat in a back row, trying to make himself invisible. He wore dark clothing and kept his head down. He did not want anyone to see him or talk to him. He felt sick inside, and his blue skin felt cold, even though the auditorium was warm. On the stage, the lights became dim. A screen lit up with the words, "Human Civilization, a True History." Below the words was a blue and green image of planet Earth. The presentation was about to begin. Ji-woo walked to the front of the stage. She was wearing formal human clothes, which looked very different from the clothing that aliens wore. She looked calm and confident. She looked at the crowd of hundreds of alien faces looking back at her. "Thank you for coming," Ji-woo said in her clear voice. "We have been asked to talk about human history. We have been told that humans are a primitive species. We have been told that we are extinct. We have been told that we are mythological." Ji-woo paused and looked directly at Professor Kevin in the back row. "But we are here to tell you the truth." Ji-woo started to talk about human history. She talked about how humans began as simple creatures and slowly learned to create tools and build shelters. She talked about how humans discovered fire and learned to farm. She talked about how human civilizations grew and developed. She talked about the mistakes that humans made, and she did not try to hide them. She talked about the wars and the suffering. She talked about the times when humans had hurt each other and their planet. But she also talked about human achievement. She talked about the first humans who looked at the stars and wondered what they were. She talked about the scientists who understood the earth and the sky and the small particles that made everything work. She talked about people who created art so beautiful that it made you want to cry. Nari came to the stage next. She held a small device in her hands, and images appeared on the screen behind her. The images showed human technology from thousands of years ago to the present time. She showed simple stone tools, then metal tools, then machines, then computers, then spaceships. "Look at this progress," Nari said. She had a sharp, intelligent voice that made you want to listen. "Humans went from rocks to spaceships. We did this by asking questions. We did it by studying nature and learning how it worked. We did it because we wanted to understand the universe around us." Nari talked about human medicine. She explained how humans discovered that tiny things too small to see could make people sick. She talked about how humans learned to stop these tiny things from hurting people. She talked about how humans had discovered ways to fix broken bones and cure diseases. The aliens in the audience listened with wide eyes. Teo came to the stage and talked about human technology in a different way. He showed them devices that humans had created. He explained how humans had learned to make electricity work for them. He showed them computers and communication devices. He demonstrated how humans had learned to control their environment and create comfort for themselves. "All of this," Teo said, holding up a small device that humans used to communicate with each other, "all of this came from asking questions and trying to find answers. Humans are not primitive. Humans are creative. Humans are curious. Humans are intelligent." Junho came to the stage. He was a physicist, and he talked about human contributions to science. He explained mathematical principles that humans had discovered. He talked about how humans had figured out how things moved and why things fell and how light and energy worked. He talked about how humans had sent machines to explore other worlds in their solar system. Mine came next. She was a biologist, and she talked about how humans had studied living things. She showed pictures of human medical discoveries. She talked about how humans had learned to cure diseases that had killed millions of people. She talked about how human doctors worked to help people who were sick and injured. Finally, Sung-il came to the stage. He was an engineer, and he talked about how humans had built things. He showed pictures of human buildings and bridges and cities. He explained how humans had learned to work together to create large structures. He showed them pictures of human art and architecture that was beautiful and creative. Then the presentation took a different direction. The screen went black. A video began to play. It showed scenes from human life. It showed humans holding their children. It showed humans creating art and music. It showed humans helping each other. It showed humans protecting nature and trying to make their world better. It showed humans laughing and celebrating and enjoying life together. As the video played, many aliens in the audience were watching with their eyes full of emotion. Some of them had expressions of surprise. Some looked thoughtful. Some seemed to be understanding something for the first time. The video ended. The stage became quiet, and then the entire auditorium began to clap and cheer. The sound was very loud. Hundreds of aliens were standing up, clapping their hands or making their species' way of showing appreciation. The humans on the stage looked surprised and pleased. In the back row, Professor Kevin sat with his face in his hands. He could not watch anymore. His career was over. His reputation was destroyed. Everything he had built was falling apart right in front of him. The dean walked onto the stage. She was a large, dignified Zentorian female with gray streaks in her blue skin. She was clapping too. "This was extraordinary," the dean said. "Thank you for showing us the truth. I must apologize to you. We have been teaching false information about your species for many years. This was a mistake on our part, and we will fix it." The dean turned to look at where Professor Kevin was sitting in the back. She was not smiling. She looked disappointed and angry. "There will be changes to our curriculum," the dean announced. "We will create new courses about actual human civilization. We will remove incorrect information from our teaching materials. And we will look into how this false information became part of our university teaching in the first place." The dean left the stage, and Ji-woo, Nari, Tai-o, Junho, Min-ai, and Sung-il stayed on the stage, answering questions from excited aliens who wanted to learn more about human civilization. Professor Kevin stood up quietly and left the auditorium. No one noticed him going. Everyone was too interested in the humans and their amazing presentation. As Kevin walked through the empty hallways of the university, he thought about all the years he had spent teaching lies. He thought about all the students who had learned false information from him. He thought about how he had refused to see the truth even when it was right in front of him. And he wondered if anyone would ever forgive him. 3 days after the presentation, Professor Kevin received a message from the dean. The message was short and direct. It told him to come to the dean's office at a specific time. Kevin's hands shook as he read the words on his communication device. He knew what this meeting was about. He knew that his time at the university was probably over. The dean's office was large and impressive, with windows that looked out over the campus. The dean sat behind a big desk, and she was not alone. There was another Zentarian male next to her, someone Kevin recognized as being from the university's management department. "Please sit down, Kevin," the dean said. She did not smile. She did not make small talk. She just watched him as he sat in the chair across from her desk. "I have been reviewing your research," the dean began. "I have looked at your books. I have looked at your published papers. I have looked at the sources that you say you based your work on." The dean paused. "And I have found something very troubling." Kevin did not say anything. He just waited. "Much of your research is based on very old information," the dean continued. "Information that has been proven to be inaccurate by more recent studies. Information that contradicts what we now know to be true about human civilization. And in some cases, Kevin, I have found that you have misquoted sources. You have taken information out of context. You have made claims that the original research does not support." The other Zentarian male spoke now. His voice was cold and professional. "This is a serious matter, Professor. We have called in an independent review team to examine your work. We will be looking into whether your research meets the standards of academic integrity that this university requires." Kevin felt his heart drop into his stomach. Academic integrity violations were serious. Very serious. They could end a career permanently. "I did not mean to mislead anyone," Kevin said quietly. "I was trying to teach what I believed was true." "Yes," the dean said, "but a teacher has a responsibility to verify their information before teaching it to students. You did not do that. Instead, you accepted old myths as facts. And you taught those myths to your students as if they were true." The dean leaned back in her chair. "We have decided to give you a choice, Kevin. You can resign from the university immediately, and we will keep this matter private. Or you can continue with the review process and we will see where it leads. But I must tell you, the evidence against you is very strong. A formal inquiry would likely result in your dismissal." Kevin closed his eyes. Both choices were bad. If he resigned, his career was over, but at least it would not be public scandal. If he continued, he might be fired in a formal, public way that would follow him for the rest of his life. "I need time to think," Kevin said. "You have until tomorrow," the dean replied. "After that, I will need your decision." Kevin left the office feeling like he was floating. He did not remember walking back to his office. He did not remember anything until he was sitting alone in his room, staring at nothing. That night, he did something he had not done in a long time. He went to find Professor Rada. He found her in the library doing research. She looked up when she saw him coming toward her. "Hello, Kevin," Rada said. "I was wondering when you would come to talk to me." "How did you know I would come?" Kevin asked. "Because," Rada said, "you are not a bad person. You are just a person who made mistakes. And people who are not bad usually want to fix their mistakes eventually." Kevin sat down next to Rada. "The dean is giving me a choice, resign quietly or face a formal review." "I know," Rada said. She was not surprised. "What will you do?" "I do not know," Kevin said. "Either way, my career is over." Rada looked at him carefully. "Your career at this university might be over, but that does not mean you cannot have another career. It does not mean you cannot learn and grow and become better." Rada paused. "If you resign quietly, the scandal ends, but the lie continues. The false information about humans continues to exist in the minds of everyone who read your books and attended your classes. Is that what you want?" Kevin did not answer. "I have been studying human civilization this past week," Rada continued. "I have been reading what real scholars have written about them. The information is fascinating, and it is very different from what you taught. But more than that, Kevin, I have been thinking about how this happened. How did we all accept lies about an entire species for so long?" "Because we wanted to believe them," Kevin said quietly. "Because it is easier to believe old stories than to question them." "Yes," Rada said. "And that is what you need to fix. Not just your career, but your thinking, your understanding of how to be a true scholar." Kevin looked at his colleague. "You think I should face the review?" "I think," Rada said carefully, "that you should go talk to the 3 humans. You should apologize to them. You should ask them what they think you should do. And then you should listen to what they say. Really listen, not just hear their words." The next morning, Kevin found Jiwoo, Nari, and Teo sitting together in a quiet place on campus. They were surprised to see him, but they did not look angry. "I am sorry," Kevin said. The words came out difficult and painful, but also true. "I am sorry for teaching false information about your people. I am sorry for treating you as if you were myths instead of real people. I am sorry for not respecting your knowledge and your truth." Jiwoo listened carefully. "Thank you for saying that," she said. "That means a lot to us." "I have been asked to resign," Kevin continued, "or to face a formal review. I do not know what to do. And I thought maybe you could help me understand what the right thing to do is." Nari and Teo looked at each other. Then Nari spoke. "We think you should not hide. We think you should face the review. But we think you should do something else, too." "What?" Kevin asked. "We think," Teo said, "that you should help create the new course about human civilization. We think you should work with us to make sure that real, accurate information is taught to future students. We think you should use your mistake to help others not make the same mistake." Kevin felt tears forming in his blue eyes. "You would do that? After everything I said about your people?" "Yes," Jiwoo said simply. "Because everyone deserves a chance to learn and change." 3 months later, Professor Kevin stood in front of a new classroom, ready to teach a new course. This time, he was teaching with truth, not myths. And he was teaching with 2 humans by his side, helping him get every fact right.